What else do you do when you have no power and there's construction going on outside? You make a video.
Hi, Editing Masson here. You might see me a lot throughout this video. In regards to the construction, I sincerely apologize. You are going to hear it a lot throughout my review of the first book. Thankfully, you aren't going to hear it anymore throughout my reviews of the other two novels, but I just wanted to apologize right up front for the very annoying construction noise in the back. Audio is not my strong suit. I'm so sorry.
The Mistborn Trilogy by Brandon Sanderson was a gift.
Really quick, I think it's really important that I add some context in here about the fact that this series was a gift to me. It added a layer of obligation and expectation to not only just read the series in general, but to also enjoy it. And the reason that that context is so important to add is because it colors my experience reading the entire trilogy. I, one, have to read it, but two, I have to enjoy it. Keep that in mind as this video goes on.
Because I wanted to expand my reading horizons. So I wanted a genre that I don't normally frequent. It took me 2 tries to read this thing. I DNF'd the first attempt. It turns out that hard magic systems, like the ones that Brandon Sanderson uses, it read to me like a physics test. And as someone who nearly failed physics, it was rough. When I attempted Mistborn again, I found that I was picking up on this hard, rule-based magic system. It was a lot easier for me to pick up on it the second time around. But in my opinion, I feel like the writing failed for me because it took me 2 times, and even still, I'm not clear on the magic system. It's very overwhelming for me and confusing, admittedly. So yeah, let's explore Mistborn. Before we proceed, spoiler warning, I will be giving away plot points of this story, so if you don't want to be spoiled, bye, it was nice having you. I wanted to come at this book from a character perspective rather than a plot perspective. So let's talk about one of our main characters, Vin, the person on the cover. Vin is a ska, basically a lesser citizen in the Central Dominance Kingdom.
I get the names wrong of places, Central Dominance, Final Empire, all that kind of stuff. I mix them up a lot. If you are a Brandon Sanderson fan and specifically a Mistborn fan, please forgive me. I mess up a lot.
And we open up on her being a very scared, paranoid, scrawny member of a thieving crew. Basically, they go and they swindle people to make money. And Vin is a Mistborn, which means she can use all of the metals in allomantic magic. Basically, she can ingest bits of metal and burn them to be granted a wide array of various powers. I explained it a bit better, but that's the whole thing that made me very confused and overwhelmed about this series. So, you know, I'm sure that there are people who can explain it far better than I can. When it is discovered that Vin is a Mistborn, she is recruited to join Kelsier's crew, and she joins in the big plan of overthrowing the Final Empire, which is ruled by what they think is an immortal god. So, you know, no small thing, right? As the story progresses, Vin experiences a lot of changes. She's asked to infiltrate the nobility. She pretends to be the niece of a lord, a lesser lord, but a noble lord. And so she attends all these balls and she starts getting to know the nobility, and she experiences this identity crisis of, am I Vin or am I Valette? By the time the novel finishes, she's still a giant question mark. She's not quite sure if she wants to be Vin, the thieving Ska, or Valette, the clumsy noblewoman. But she does know for sure she's a Mistborn, and quite possibly the next Empire assassin. When the novel really ends, huge spoiler, she's kind of a leader of the new burgeoning kingdom. In terms of characters, I really like that Vin feels like a teenager discovering herself. She's been asked to play so many roles, and she finds that she really likes aspects of them and really dislikes other aspects of them. It's a very in-your-face sort of parallel to what I think a lot of people go through high school and college and beyond, as we begin to discover ourselves and our values. And Vin is a really good example of that. Do I like her as a character? Frankly, I'm neutral towards her. The second main character that I want to talk about is Kelsier, or Kel. If I'm pronouncing these wrong, I would not be surprised. And Kelsier is a Mistborn, known as the survivor of Ascension, I think that's what it's called, in which he was sent down to the pits to mine a metal called atium. And these pits are known for no one comes out, no one survives. He did. And he is the leader of this crew who is going to hopefully overtake the final empire. I'll say it now, I adore Kelsier. He is extremely charming. He's so likable. He's so intriguing. He's borderline arrogant, but in a way that's like attractive. And not necessarily like romantically attractive, but like magnetically attractive. Like, I wouldn't mind sitting in a room with him. That's it, that's all I need. Kelsier is one of the most charming characters I have ever read, which is what makes the ending so painful. So Kelsier's role in the plan to overthrow the final empire is manifold. One, he is sowing chaos and dissent among the great houses, among the nobility, to get them to fight each other rather than focus on the Ska rebellion that they're building. He is trying to figure out the Lord Emperor's, Lord Ruler's weakness so that he can assassinate the Lord Ruler, who they think is an immortal god. So again, no small feat. And then he's also trying to be the charismatic leader. He's trying to instill in people hope and courage and the belief that the Ska are capable of overtaking the Empire. I believe it is in Dune where they talk about one of the best ways to fortify belief in a savior, often in the context of a religious savior, is to have that savior die. The martyrdom, the death of those monumental figures often rouses more passion and loyalty to the figure, to the religion, so on and so forth. The writing is very on the nose, like there's no room for interpretation. Kelsier is a Jesus figure. It is explicitly stated, he is hope. He is the thing that cannot be killed. And Kelsier frickin' dies, which is really upsetting because like, he was the powerhouse for getting me through, especially the beginning of the novel. So with him not being there, I'm like, oh, I really hope that the rest of the books can stand on their own without him for me. Because the other characters, they're not bad. But the problem is, I'm very neutral towards them. So I'm not really gonna talk about any of the others because I'm like, yeah, they're fine. They're just there. If you need any reason to read this book in particular, I haven't read the others yet, but this book in particular, Kelsier's character, he is fantastic. Now I'm not going to talk about any of the other characters at length. Hammond, Breeze, Dachshund, Clubs, all the other members of the thieving crew are really enjoyable, but like I said, I'm neutral towards them. But I am going to discuss the romance, because when I was going to attempt to read this, I was told that there's no romance in this book, and I have learned that I enjoy books a bit better when there's romance. I'm trying to get over that. I've read books that don't have romance in them and I enjoyed them. But I was really worried about reading this book knowing that there's no romance. And then when I discovered the romance in this book, I was like, I have been lied to. Now the romance in this book isn't like exceptional. It's not, I saw it coming from a mile away, but let's talk about it briefly. Let's talk about Vin and Ellen. Like I said, I saw it coming from a mile away. As soon as it was mentioned that Vin will need to pose as Valette, a woman, a noble woman, I was like, oh, she's gonna fall for another noble person. She's gonna fall for a member of the nobility because, of course, like that would bring some tension. And that's something that is a little bit disappointing to me with this book and the romance specifically. The most tension that there is between Vin and Ellen is Ellen's like, I know you're lying to me, but I care about you and I want to protect you, so I'm just gonna like kick you out in the hopes that you leave the city because things are gonna get dangerous. And like, okay, that's sweet. From a romantic tension point of view, that's boring. Now, to be fair, I have heard a lot of people, it is so loud out there. I have heard a lot of people talk about the romantic elements, especially in this trilogy, because it's toward the beginning of Brandon Sanderson's career. The romance is probably one of the weakest parts of this series in particular, this trilogy in particular. So I'm gonna give it a pass, however, I'm still gonna give my critiques. The other aspect of romance that I want to talk about is I actually ship Vin and Mistborn/Spook more. I don't know what it is. I like them better. I think it's because Mistborn/Spook has that like underdog vibe to him, and he just, I don't know, I really like him. I prefer him over Ellen. Maybe I'm just a contrarian. I don't know. That's really all I have to say about the romances. Like as the usual with my recent book reviews, we need to talk about the ending. We need to talk about the ending because at like the 520 page mark, edge of my seat, gripping the sides of the chair that I was reading in, I was Kelsier, and that ending made it worth it.
A quick disclaimer here. I love how enthusiastic I was for the first book because that's genuinely how I felt at the time. That enthusiasm does not last. So just be aware of that as the review continues.
As much as I disliked the freaking physics test that it felt like I was under trying to understand this wealth of information of the magic system. So here's the thing. It was a twist ending. I didn't see it coming. From that alone, I'm kind of tempted to reread this again to see if I pick up on any of those clues.
I don't want to speak in absolutes, but there is a very high likelihood that I will not be rereading the first book ever again. I don't know, but given my experience with the rest of the books, I don't think this is a true statement anymore.
Huge spoiler warning. You didn't click off before, click past now. I am giving it away. The Lord Ruler is not the hero that ascended. No, no, no. It's the Terraceman, the Pac-Man, who went with the hero on the hero's journey, murdered the hero, and pretended to be the hero. It was a character named Roshek, and I'm sitting here like, excuse me? Now, I will say, each chapter begins with an entry from the hero's logbook. And while reading it, because I know the titles of the other two books, I was sitting there like, something tells me Vin, specifically, is going to have to go through these exact same steps. She's gonna have to go to the Well of Ascension, she's gonna become the hero of ages. So I was like, it felt like that logbook, those entries were a parallel for the journey that Vin would have to go on through the trilogy.
So I'm clearly in the future and I finished reading the trilogy, and oh, the irony of that statement.
Yes, I was absolutely blindsided by the fact that the hero was not the hero, but rather a terroristman, a Pac-Man named Rashek, who was both a ferrochemist, or as I've been calling them, a ferrochemist, because it sounds cooler, and an allomancer, and I was just like, what? The next thing that shocked me, Marsh is alive. Marsh is an inquisitor. What? Excuse me? Inquisitors are like big, scary, like the ultimate allomancers, like spikes for eyes. It's really weird. It's weird. Inquisitors are basically like law enforcement in this world. Marsh, Kelsier's almost twin brother, has been turned into one, and earlier he was thought to be dead.
I just gotta say, I am so jealous of the energy level that I have in this first part.
Also, Vin, it's been suggested the whole time that Vin is like something more, which again, knowing what I know, it's like she's the next hero. There's an entry in the logbook that's like, if the original hero fails, they feel at peace knowing that another hero will come to save the world. Hello, that's Vin! I have got to say, that ending, freaking good. The fact that I had to read 520 some pages to get there, a little frustrating, but worth it, especially Kelsier. I'm gonna make myself sad thinking about his death. From DNF to actually looking forward to reading the rest of the series, I feel like that says a lot about this book. The beginning, the way the magic works, the rules, overwhelming. Almost too much for me in the beginning, but I attempted it again, and I'm fairly glad that I did. This book proved to be so much better than I thought it would be, and I am excited to begin the next book. Anyway, transition to the next book. Also, do you like my makeup? Pay attention to it.
And don't be alarmed if the vibe and the energy level changes with each subsequent review.
Well, Ascension is the second book in the Mistborn Trilogy, and I have a feeling it's going to be my least favorite in the series. Like last time, I'm going to tackle the characters and some other general things rather than the plot, so I'm going to start with my favorite character in the book, Orasur? Wow. In my head, I pronounce it Orsur. Didn't realize it sounded like sewer. I'll just shorten it to Ore. Ore is what's called a Kandra, a being that can take on the shape of other people and creatures. The relationship between Vin and Ore is really fascinating and really makes the story more enjoyable for me. That said, spoiler alert, you can imagine the shock I felt at the twist. Thankfully, Orasur's real name, so much easier to say, Tensoon.
I very seriously misspoke here. Straight up lied to you. Orasur's not Tensoon. They are not the same Kandra. Spoiler alert, Tensoon killed Orasur. I am so sorry for straight up lying in this. That was not my intention.
I really enjoyed Tensoon as a character. Again, it made the book more enjoyable for me. The other character that at least I was a big fan of in book 1 and most of book 2 is Sazed. Again, I could be pronouncing it wrong, but that's how I pronounce the name in my head, so that's what we're saying. Sazed is another character that I really enjoy. He's a really like sweet, gentle soul. He's like the wise man of the group, and I really enjoy him. Book 2 seemed fairly focused on his character development. The character development of Vin and Ellen didn't really seem to be much of a focus for the second book. However, the way Sazed develops in this story is frankly disappointing to me. By the time the book ends, I'm not that invested in him or the storylines that he will more than likely continue to go through as the trilogy concludes. Oh, I briefly want to mention Tindwyl. I always read her name as Twindle. Now she's Twindle. I'm so sorry. Tindwyl? Dwill? Twindle. Now I need to talk about the romance. I have hit the point where I want Ellen to die. It's such a bad romance. Here's why it feels so bad for me. I think I mentioned at least a little bit in my review of the first book that there is a lot of missed opportunity between Vin and Ellen. There are multiple times throughout book 1 and book 2 where really intriguing tension can be explored. Vin being a ska, Ellen being nobility, them essentially spying on each other could have been really fascinating and a wonderful opportunity to explore the tensions between these characters. Book 2 provides something very similar and does explore it a little bit. Vin does question how she feels about Ellen, particularly because of the characters that there is so much more chemistry between Vin and Zane than there has ever been between Vin and Ellen. I'm sorry, that's just how I feel. But Zane was just such a fascinating character. To me, he was the most complex character because he wasn't all good.
I feel a bit compelled here to clarify a little bit about what I meant by this comment. I feel that the vast majority of the main characters in this trilogy, they're predictable because they're good. They will choose to do the right thing in the end. Whether or not they stumble their way through it, they will do the right thing. Zane was interesting because you didn't know if he would do the right thing or not.
Even though in book 2 there is an exploration of would Zane be better for Vin because Zane is also Mistborn, the way it's resolved, I don't feel that the romance, at least in the Mistborn Trilogy, is utilized well enough. So much character development can and should occur in romances. It's the person that you feel the most strongly about, hopefully, and the person that hopefully you spend the most time with. They should, ideally, especially in fiction, have a huge impact on you. But Vin and Ellen, I feel, don't affect each other. Zane affected Vin. Instead, Vin and Ellen simply praise each other for how good the other one is, and everything is resolved as, yeah, no, I just love you. Romance can be done well. Romance can be interesting. This is not interesting. This is very boring. And to have Vin and Ellen be married now, it feels too easy, and I don't like it. The romance, to me, does not feel earned.
The romance feels entirely too fairy tale for such a cruel, fictional world.
I still ship Spook and Vin. I'm just saying. I don't know what it is about these books that I feel so incapable of talking plot, because it feels like my reading of this series so far is it's very plot-based. It's very action-driven. And there's certainly nothing wrong with that. There are plenty of really awesome things out there that take that approach. But it feels like so much happens in these books that I just become overwhelmed with the idea of talking about the plot. I'm just going to summarize it by saying this book is mostly political intrigue. It's the question of how do we restructure the government? And if that's interesting to you, I'm sorry to disappoint, That's not interesting to me, so I'm not gonna talk about it. Like with the first book, this book drags for me, especially near the end. Obviously, the first book was super exciting for me for the last like 20 pages. But I now know, going into this book and the last book, to expect twists, to expect a twist ending. And twist ending I received. This time around though, because of how much of a drag this book was for me to get through, the twist wasn't enough, unlike the first book. I hit the point where I basically just forced myself to finish the book, to say that I finished the book, just so I could be done with the sequel. A very brief aside, this is a weird thing for me to complain about, because normally I've never had to complain about this. With most fantasy books that I read, the names of the characters and places feel like they fit, that they're perfect fantasy names, names that I wish I had thought of. Not the case for me with this series. These are some of the worst fantasy names, in my opinion. I don't like them. With that said, I am determined to finish this trilogy. 1, I've already committed to it, sunken cost fallacy a little bit. 2, I've committed to a video on it. And 3, I just want to be able to say that I read the darn thing. Full transparency, I'm really struggling to go into the final book with an open mind, because as enjoyable as the final 20 pages of the first book were, having 500 pages of drag from the first book was a bit rough, and having nearly 600 pages of drag that weren't even enough to make the twist ending exciting for me. I'm not sure how I feel going into the final book, but I'm going to do it. I'm going to read this thing, and I'll try harder to go into it with an open mind. Can we please take a moment to admire the look? I think it is spectacular. It's bizarre. It's weird. I love it. Thank you. Wait until you see the next look. Yeah, you think this is wild? Just wait. Of course, on the day where I have the most extreme makeup look, my eyeliner runs out. Isn't that fun? This video, third book in the trilogy, recording it just didn't want to happen, because reading this, I thought I had like 6 hours left of reading. No, I had like 8 or 9. So that delayed me. My makeup runs out. My stomach gets upset. So I have to delay recording again. I don't know. Something's telling me that this video for this book just doesn't want to happen. But I am gonna make it happen. Let's talk about the hero of ages. Yet again, I'm not really going to touch on plot very much, so instead I'm going to talk about characters, as with the other reviews of the Mistborn Trilogy. We're going to start with Tensoon. Tensoon is still my favorite. The Kandra Society was like the most interesting bit of these books to me, which is why I was a little bit disappointed. Obviously, it played a very significant role, but ultimately in the books, the society itself played a very minor role, and I was so interested in Kandra culture. I feel like I might actually be able to tackle a book just about Kandra culture. I also want to talk briefly about Spook. He was an intriguing character. I really appreciated that like he was starting to go down the bad path and then realized something was wrong and went back, because Spook is an enjoyable character for me. So for him to, maintain his spookiness was enjoyable. Let's talk about the twists in this book. I think I mentioned it in my review of book 2, where now that I know to expect the twists don't surprise me too much anymore. And this book is very much a testament to that. I predicted almost, definitely not all, but almost all of the twists in this book, which kind of made me feel good about myself. It made me feel very smart. And huge spoiler alert, if you don't want the ending of this series spoiled for you, skip past this part. When I said this last video, I want Ellen to die. People who have read this series were probably like, just you wait, it's gonna happen. Ellen died? I don't like that I take so much joy from that fact. It doesn't make me feel good about myself, but I got what I wanted. So there is the sadistic part of me that is satisfied. My experience reading this trilogy was not a good one. I said that I DNF'd the first book because I just couldn't get into it. But I forced myself to try again, and I did really enjoy my experience. Well, the last like 20 pages reading the first book. Otherwise, my reading experience was a slog. And that reading experience of it being a slog lasted the rest of the trilogy. And I pushed myself to read it regardless because I thought, maybe this will be worth it for the content. Maybe it'll be worth it for this video. But I don't think it was. I made a mistake. I have one major regret. I regret pushing myself so hard to keep reading rather than give myself permission to accept the simple fact that I just do not enjoy Brandon Sanderson's writing style. It made reading it not fun, and I wouldn't be surprised if this video is lackluster because of that. That said, I doubt I will read another Brandon Sanderson book. Maybe one day in the future. I don't want to close that door entirely, but how I felt forcing myself to read these books the way that I did, I just don't know if it's worth it. Not even for the content. Also, did anyone pick up on the fact that my makeup looks were based on obligator tattoos and the fact that like with each book, I went higher in the ranks? Because I feel very clever for that. I wanted to take a moment to talk about Brandon Sanderson's writing specifically because from my brief research, which was admittedly biased, it seems that his straightforward style can be quite polarizing. On the one hand, people really like how direct it is. It is very accessible to a wide array of people because of its straightforward nature. But on the other hand, you have people like me who frankly don't care for it. I like flowery prose. One of the reasons that I love writing so much is because of the beautiful things you can do with words and language and syntax. And Brandon Sanderson's writing, to me, feels like it spoon feeds the audience. It spoon feeds the readers.
Another thing that I want to mention really briefly, what I mean by spoon feeding, characters' actions and words match almost exactly all the time. And for me, it just isn't an interesting read when that happens. But I can understand the appeal of it.
You don't have to figure out metaphor, you don't have to interpret anything, and frankly, I just didn't connect with it. I understand the allure of these books though. The intricacy of the plots, the carefully crafted twist endings that make you want to read the next book with a ravenous hunger. There's enough character something to make you feel for these characters, to relate to them, to enjoy them. You care if and when they die. That wasn't my experience with these characters, but I can see it. The prose certainly isn't atrocious. The world building, the definitive rule-bound magic system, I get it. If these books, because of their accessibility, because of the fact that they're easy reads, gets more people reading, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. Brandon Sanderson's approach to writing and prose just isn't for me, and I think that's okay. Thank you guys guys so much for watching. This video was a struggle to do for a variety of reasons. So if you made it through, thank you so much. Please like, comment, share, subscribe, all that typical YouTuber stuff. And I hope I can see you guys in the next one. Bye. This is why it's important to read the things that you enjoy. To an extent. Like, even if you enjoy hate reading it. Like, this wasn't even an enjoyable hate read for me. This was just rough. Lesson learned.